So here we are on page 228, folks.
Okay.
And supplement 15, the 5 spheres described by Meher Baba,
Wow.
page 70. That again is part 7, the sevenfold veil. I'll start us off. Meher
Yes.
Baba says there are 5 spheres. Number 1, gross. Number 2, subtle. Number 3, mental. Number 4, composite. And number 5, the real sphere. The first 4 concern relative existences, and the 5th one is composed of the one and only real existence. The question of details is all the more important when a subject is beyond ordinary human experience. On the one hand, more details confuse one more, and less details explain things less. This gives rise to a variety of terms and expressions for use from different viewpoints and in different contexts. In the absence of underlying experience, descriptions of the same one thing often sound contradictory. But in the light of relative experiences or the final realization of truth, the very contradictions prove to be complementary expressions about the same one truth. The facts and the fact of facts underlying the 5 spheres will bear this out. The first, the gross sphere, although entirely depending for its existence on the subtle, is distinctly different in very many respects from the subtle. The gross sphere consists of numberless worlds, suns, moons, stars, and in fact, everything material, from the crudest to the finest. Some of the worlds in the gross sphere contain minerals and vegetation only. Some others contain countless embodied beings also. And in some, there are included human beings. The point of prime importance in the gross sphere is our world, Earth. Here, amongst all other beings who are conscious in greater or lesser degree of the gross, man with his full consciousness is superior to all other beings of all gross worlds. We have a asterisk here. This means also superior spiritually amongst all human beings of the gross sphere. Meher Baba tells us that of the 3 worlds in the gross sphere which are inhabited by human beings, ours, the earth, is the one where man is the highest spiritually. He explains that whereas man on this earth possesses in his personality equal degrees of head and heart, brackets, 50% head and 50% heart, man on the other 2 worlds possesses 100% head and 75% head and 25% heart, respectively. Man, in the course of his reincarnations, is born on any one of the 3 worlds, but must finally take form and reincarnate on this earth to fulfill his divine destiny, which is God realization. In the gross sphere, the earth is the last and nearest stepping stone to the path. The two other worlds are most close to the earth in the pattern of habitation. Although there are 1,800 worlds with life, 18,000 worlds with life, but these two worlds and the earth are akin to one another in the pattern of human life. But until man here awakens to the subtle, his full consciousness remains fully occupied with the gross, even when he reads and thinks of spiritual subjects such as the one discussed here. The second, the subtle sphere, is the sphere of energy, and although it is divided into 7 divisions, it is one world by itself. Its subsistence depends upon the mental sphere, but it exists entirely independent of the gross sphere. In the parlance of time and space, the domain of the gross sphere, with its infinite space comprising universes of innumerable suns, planets, and worlds, including our Earth, is but a speck as compared with the subtle sphere. The path of self-realization, the Ra-e Tariqat of the Sufis, and the Adhyatmik Marga of the Vedantas, consisting of 7 planes, mukams or sthans, is the one and only bridge between the first sphere of the gross and the 5th, the real sphere. The path has its first 3 planes in the subtle, the 2nd sphere. Marian?
The subtle sphere, through its energy, its angels, and above all through man's partial and full subtle consciousness, bracket, human consciousness partly or fully freed from the gross in the gross. While penetrating the gross sphere itself, also penetrates infinite space with its suns, stars, planets, and, in fact, everything and every being in all the worlds within the gross sphere. The unlimited diversity and intensity of subtle sights, sounds, feelings, and powers have no parallel in the gross sphere, save energy, which becomes limited within the bounds of the gross, and human consciousness, which is surrounded by gross limitations. The third, the mental sphere, is the sphere of the spheres. It is absolutely independent of both the subtle and gross spheres, and is independently sustained by divinity. The mental sphere is the very abode of mind, individual, collective, and universal. The mind pervades its own sphere as much as it does throughout the subtle and gross spheres. This sphere of the mind includes everything relating to intellect, intuition, insight, and illumination. Herein are also contained the loftier planes of the path, the fifth and the sixth. The fourth plane is but a junction between the third plane in the subtle sphere and the fifth plane in the mental sphere. Nevertheless, the mental sphere does not and cannot touch the real sphere, as nothing can touch it save its own reality, conscious of itself in the eternal, I am God, state of God. The fourth, the composite sphere, is the most named and the least understood one. It is composed of 21 subspheres, and as such, it is both a sphere and not a sphere by itself. The 21 connecting links are made up of 7 subgross and subsubtle spheres between the gross and the subtle spheres, 7 subsubtle and submental spheres between the subtle and the mental spheres, and 7 submental and sub-supramental spheres between the mental sphere and the real sphere. The peculiar nature and position of the composite sphere could be grasped more easily through either of the following tables. Table 1 is the gross is 1, and there are 7 subspheres. 2 is subtle, that's the middle. 3 is mental, that's the higher. 5 is real. And those subtle and mental spheres are called the composite spheres. Table 2, number 1, the gross sphere, first sphere, 7 lower subspheres of 4, the composite sphere, fourth sphere. 2, the subtle sphere, that is second sphere. 7 middle subspheres of the composite sphere, fourth sphere. Number 4. 3, the mental sphere, third sphere. 7 higher subspheres of number 4, the composite sphere, fourth sphere. 5, the real sphere, fifth sphere. The 7 lower subspheres are spiritually superior to the gross sphere, and they do touch the gross, whereas the 7 higher subspheres are neither spiritually superior to the mental sphere, nor can they ever touch the real sphere, as will be clear from further details which follow. On the one hand, the all-important path, the one and only bridge between man and God, runs through the 2 spheres of the subtle and the mental. And on the other hand, there are innumerable things and beings in these 2 spheres, as well as in between the 7 lower and 7 higher subspheres. And each one of the things and beings is directly or indirectly vital to the path.
Thanks, Marion. Mahu.
Yes. So page 232 on God Speaks supplement. From the 7 lower to the 7 middle subspheres, inclusive of the subtle sphere, amongst other things that are the abodes of the disembodied souls or spirits, and the unembodied souls, angels. From the 7 middle to the 7 higher subsphere, inclusive of the mental sphere, amongst other things, there is the abode of the archangels. The spirits or disembodied souls, both good and bad, have to remain in the state of waiting, both before and after experiencing the states of pleasure and pain, states commonly known as heaven and hell. The angels or unembodied souls are mere automatons for the will of God, and they do nothing which is not desired or prompted by God. These wishes happen to be mere expressions of the divine power and activity, which are all pervading. In short, angels are pure and not contaminated with physical embodiment. In this, they are superior to the man whose consciousness has not extended beyond the limitations of the gross, meaning a man not yet on the path. Paradoxically, man, the inferior, who has succeeded in being contaminated with physical embodiment, is actually the superior in the strength of the potentialities latent within him. Experiencing his imperfections, limitations, and weaknesses, he is potentially ripe to realize his real strength and purity, which are far above those of and beyond the reach of even the archangels. The archangels are the mediums for the expression of God's principal divine attributes of creating, preserving, and destroying limited life on an unlimited scale, and of communicating unlimited knowledge on a limited scale. The archangels are entities who always enjoy and never suffer. The abode of the archangels, the sub-supermental spheres of the fourth, the composite sphere, which is discussed here, comes after the third, the mental sphere, and is near the fifth, the real sphere. This is true, yet not the whole truth, for in spite of its proximity, it cannot touch the real sphere. An archangel from the highest sub-supermental sphere can never see God, whereas man in the sixth plane of the third, the mental sphere, can and does see God face to face everywhere and in everything. The last point of the sub-supramental spheres is what the Sufi call the Sadratul Muntaha, or the last limit, beyond which, as is popularly and rightly believed by the Muslims, even the Archangel Gabriel cannot go. Man has and man shall, because man alone can jump over the last 7 links of the really non-existent relative existences of all the 4 spheres into his really own, the 5th, the real sphere. In short, angels must necessarily cease to be angels and become man before they can reach the reality attainable to man. And when man ceases to be man and enters the I am state, he realizes that angels and archangels are in fact his own attributes in one sense or another. Finally, the dissolution of the higher 7 subsphere of the 4th, the composite sphere, is the phenomenon called Qiyamat or Mahaparalaya. And when this takes place, the whole of the non-existence existence of creation, which all its sphere and subspheres, like a manifested tree, recedes into the unmanifested seed form of non-existence, only to be manifested anew once more in the very next moment of eternity.
Thanks, Mahu. Ernie.
The 4th, the composite sphere, is commonly included in the first 3 spheres as follows. 1. The gross sphere plus part of the 4th, the composite sphere, is the Alam e Nasut of the Sufis and the Ana Bhuvan of the Vedantists. 2. The subtle sphere plus part of the 4th, the composite sphere, is the Alam e Malakut of the Sufis and the Pran Bhuvan of the Vedantists. The mental sphere plus part of the 4th, the composite sphere, is the Alam e Jabrut of the Sufis and the Mano Bhuvan of the Vedantists. The latter also call the 3, including the 4th, spheres collectively the Tribhuvan, triple sphere, and the Sufis call them collectively Do Alam, 2 spheres, meaning the gross on the one hand and the subtle and the mental, including the composite sphere, on the other hand. The 5th, the real sphere, is also the 7th plane of the path, the plane of full superconsciousness, which in simple words means the full human consciousness, fully freed from any vestige or tinge of duality inherent in varying degrees in all of the four spheres of relative existence. It would not be wrong to say that the fifth sphere, or the seventh plane, is neither any sphere nor plane, but the reality of God's very selfhood, referred to by humanity as Allah, Paramatma, Almighty God, Yezdan, and so on. According to the different states of the same one God, from is to I am God, and from I am God to I am everything, there are different terms for the different stages or aspects of the real sphere. Such an alam-i-lahut of the Sufis, or Vidnyan, Bhumika, and Vidnyan. 16. The types of conviction and knowledge. 73. According to the Sufis, the spiritual life consists of 4 stages, and man's life on earth, in all its aspects, is but a preparation, conscious or unconscious, for the ever unfolding realms of knowledge and illumination that lead to God realization. These 4 stages are Shariat, Dharma Shastra, Tariqat, Adhyatma Marga, Hakagat, God realization, or Aikya, and Marifat Hakakat, Gnosis, or Sati Anubhuti. Imam Muhammad Ghazali has compared these 4 stages to a walnut, which has 4 constituents: the outer skin or husk, the inner skin or lining, the kernel, and the oil within. To make the analogy more explicit, we say that Shariat is the outer husk, Taragat, the inner lining, Hakakat, the kernel, and Marifat, Hakakat, the oil. As the aspirant advances through these 4 stages, he acquires an ever-increasing measure of certainty concerning truth. These enduring certainties are known to the Sufis as 1. Imhul Yakin, 2a. Yakin ul Yakin, 2b. Anhul Yakin, 3. Hak ul Yakin, 4. Irfhul Yakin. 1. Imhul Yakin, or intellectual certainty, conviction, is derived through rock-like faith. 2. Yakin ul Yakin, or perceptual certainty, through awareness of God, is derived from inner feelings, visions, or spiritual experiences on the path. It is conviction of the soul on the first step through the 5th plane. 2b. An ul Yakin, or visual certainty, that is, conviction by sight, is the experience of actually seeing God everywhere and continually. This is Antar Drishti. 3. Hak ul Yakin, or certainty of realization, that is, conviction by actual experience, is attained by the soul on the 7th plane of the spiritual journey, which is Hak Akat. Here the soul realizes itself through itself. This state is Akya, union with God. Hol Yakin, or certainty of gnosis, concerns the perfection of divinity in man, by which man, living the life of God, knows all the mysteries of the self and of the universe. The faculty brought into play here is the universal mind, Sarvabhaumik Manas, or Akol Ikul, which is the seat of all divine discrimination. To illustrate these types of convictions still further, let us suppose that a man comes to know that there is milk in a certain vessel. To have implicit faith in this knowledge through intellect and intuitive perception is Hum ul Yakin and Yakin ul Yakin. If he is not satisfied with this intellectual and intuitive conviction and actually takes the trouble to go over to the vessel and see the milk with his own eyes, and thus feel convinced that the actuality tallies with his intellectual and intuitive knowledge, he experiences the certainty known as Anhul Yakin. To drink the milk and to become, to all intents and purposes, one with it, gives him the experience of Hak ul Yakin, and to find within himself the knowledge of all that expresses and represents milk, such as sugar, water, fat, vitamins, etc., and to be able to describe these and the various uses of milk to others in detail is a certainty of knowledge, or gnosis, that is Urf Hol Yakin, which is the stage of Marafat il Hakikat.
Thanks, Ern. Marion.
Five types of knowledge. According to the Sufis, there are 5 types of knowledge affecting human beings. The first is the knowledge of the world, which is confined to the attainment of material well-being. The second is the knowledge of Shariat, which is mostly used by those who have acquired it to overthrow their opponents with the wordy warfare of logic and argument. This knowledge is that of the exoteric divines. The third type of knowledge is that of the spiritual path, and it is found with those who have seriously taken to some inner discipline and have shunned the society of exoterics. In this knowledge, the ego still persists, and the consciousness of good and evil still clings to the soul. The knowledge of philosophers and thinkers is on the borderline between the second and third types of knowledge. The fourth type of knowledge is that of God, the self, Hakikat. One who arrives at this knowledge has no tinge of false ego left, and all vestige of duality disappears. The fifth type of knowledge is the real gnosis, the marifat of Hakikat, which Meher Baba explains is a complete knowledge of God and a complete knowledge of the universe. This is the knowledge of perfection possessed by the Rasul, avatar, and the Kutub, Sadguru. Unless a soul goes through all the different stages of knowledge, the highest stage of Tasawwuf, Wisdom, which is suluk, return to normal consciousness, can never be attained. Arriving at this stage of gnosis entitles one to be called a perfect Sufi, meaning perfect master. There are, however, instances where persons have reached the fourth stage of knowledge without going through the intermediary stages, but they are quite exceptional and occur only when such persons are led by a perfect master. Meher Baba divides all spiritually advanced souls into 5 basic types: God merged, perfect one; God intoxicated, God absorbed, God communed, and God mad. The reader is referred to Chapter 1, pages 21 to 37 of Dr. William Donkin's book, The Wayfarers, which delineates Baba's treatment of this subject. S- s- hmm. 17, Paramatma is infinite and everything. 80, Paramatma is infinite and everything. All Atmas are in Paramatma. Some Atmas experience the gross world, some experience the subtle world, and some the mental world, and some experience Paramatma. As all Atmas are in Paramatma, they also have these different experiences in Paramatma. Those who experience, meaning the experiencers, and the very experiences are all in Paramatma. Although the experiencers and the experiences are in Paramatma, they are not of Paramatma. They are of the nothing. Paramatma is the everything, and the nothing is in the everything. Hence, the Atmas that are conscious of only Sharir, Pran, or Manas are not conscious of self. In other words, such Atmas are conscious of the nothing and not of the everything. Such Atmas experience the gross, subtle, or mental world and do not experience Paramatma. That is, they experience the nothing and do not experience the everything. Therefore, it can be said that Atmas that are in Paramatma are not conscious of the self and are not experiencing Paramatma, but they are conscious of the nothing and are of the nothing, and they experience the nothing. These Atmas identify themselves with the nothing so realistically that they apparently become nothing. Every being is nothing personified. All beings and things are personifications of the nothing that is in the everything. Five spiritual facts, paren 107. 1, ordinary human being. Man as man sees himself in everyone and everything. 2, peer in sixth plane. Man as man sees God in everyone and everything. 3, Majub, in seventh plane, God as God sees himself in everyone and everything. 4, Kutub, God as man sees himself simultaneously in everyone and everything. 5, Savior, God as God and man sees himself simultaneously in everyone and everything. And then a reference, Meher Baba.
Thanks, Marion. Mahu. We see your lips moving, but no sound.
I'm sorry. Okay. 19. Real birth and real death. There is one real birth and one real death. You are born once and you really die only once. What is the real birth? It is the birth of a drop in the ocean of reality. What is meant by the birth of a drop in the ocean of reality? It is the advent of individuality, born of the indivisibility through a glimmer of the first most finite consciousness, which transfixed cognizance of limitation into the unlimited. What is meant by real death? It is consciousness getting free from all limitations. Freedom from all limitations is real death. It is really the death of all limitations. It is liberation. In between the real birth and real death, there is so much reality as the so-called births and deaths. What really happens in the intermediate stage known as births and deaths is that the limitations of consciousness gradually wear off until the consciousness is free from all limitations. Ultimately, consciousness, totally free from all limitations, experiences the unlimited reality eternally. Real dying is equal to real living. Therefore, I stress, die for God and you will live as God. You are first a child. Then you grow old and drop the body, but you never die and never were born. In the East, Vedantists believe in reincarnation and in a number of births and deaths until one attains godhood. The Muslims believe in one birth only and one death only. The Christians and Zoroastrians hold the same belief. All are right, but Jesus, Buddha, Muhammad, Zoroaster all meant what I mean by real birth and real death. I say you are born once and die once. All the so-called births and deaths are only sleeps and wakings. The difference between sleeps and death is that after you sleep, you awake and find yourself in the same body. But after death, you awake in a different body. You never die. Only the blessed ones die and become one with God. Number 20, Fauna and Fauna fillah. Fauna is the state of unconscious consciousness. In Fauna fillah, soul is unconscious of everything except self being God. Before the soul loses its human state and gains the divine state of nirvakalpa, it has to experience the vacuum state of nirvana. Nirvana is the infinite vacuum, a state in which the soul is fully conscious of real nothing. And if in the state of nirvana, the human body is dropped, one passes into a state of infinite bliss of God. In some cases, nirvana is immediately and inevitably followed by nirvakalpa or fanafillah, where the soul is fully conscious of real everything. Nirvana and nirvakalpa are so closely linked that each can be said to be the divine goal. False nothing equal to false everything. Real nothing is equal to neither everything nor nothing. Real everything is equal to God, the infinite. False nothing leads to false everything. And real nothing leads to real everything. False nothing is linked to false everything, and real nothing is linked to real everything. Eventually, false nothing ends in false everything, and real nothing ends in real everything. In duality, false nothing is false everything. In unity, real nothing and real everything are one. Meher Baba has also made the following points. 1. The real goal is to realize God in human form. But those who drop their bodies before attaining God realization, like those who drop their bodies in the state of nirvana before attaining the state of nirvakalpa, their goal is liberation or mukti from the cycle of rebirth. They experience infinite bliss only. The individuality, number 2, the individuality of the one who attains nirvakalpa state is remained as infinite and unlimited even after dropping the human body, and there is a continuous experience of I am God. But the one who attains mukti or liberation experiences I am Anand, page 240. I am infinite bliss. And this limits his experience of unlimited individuality of I am infinite power, knowledge, bliss, simultaneously. Number 3, infinite knowledge is the most important aspect of true nature of God. When an individual realizes God in human form, infinite bliss remains the important aspect of one's experience when one has dropped one's body in the state of nirvana and attains mukti or liberation as the goal. Majzub Kamil, number 4. Majzub Kamil experiences infinite knowledge, power, bliss simultaneously And when he comes down to normal consciousness, for example, when he is also duality conscious and is no more in the state of Majzub Kamil, he not only experiences knowledge, power, bliss, but also uses them while having his human body.
Thanks, Mahu. Ernie.
21. The Sufi conception of Fauna and Baka. This is a short study of the terms Fauna and Baka as understood by the Sufis. Every plane has a Fauna and Baka of its own. It must be remembered that the fauna of the planes is not the fauna of the seventh plane, and that the Baka of the planes is not the Baka of the Kutub state, the state of perfection. The following are some of the chief points of comparison in Sufi gnosis, and it will be seen that their exposition is mostly in relation to the seventh plane, and that their terms have, of course, a transcendental application. Fauna literally means effacement or annihilation. It is a state that is not permanent. Baka literally means permanence and is a state that abides forever. Fauna signifies the end of traveling towards God. Baka signifies the beginning of traveling in God. Fauna is not to be considered as an attribute. It is not like the dissolution of sugar in water. According to Hushwiri, it does not signify the disappearance of essence. Baka represents that which was not non-existent before and will not be non-existent afterwards, like the essence of God. Page 241. Fauna in the disappearance of the cognition of Gair, the other, that is, duality.
غیر.
Page 241. Fauna is the disappearance of the cognition of Gahir, the other, that is, duality. Baka is the knowledge of God that one gains after the disappearance of Gahir. Fauna, to Mahmud Shah Bishtari in Gulshan Iraz, is death of passion, of self-will, and of the ego, resulting in the spiritual awakening to eternal life, Baka. It also means the forgetfulness of the false ego, Kudai, which has so long been concealing man's reality, God, from himself. If it occurs to the aspirant that he is effaced from self, it is a defect. The highest state is to be effaced from effacement. Fauna is of two kinds, outward and inward. Outward fauna, this is the fauna of deeds and the glory of divine deeds. The possessor of this fauna becomes so immersed in divine deeds that he is oblivious of himself and of everything except of the desire and the will of God. Some holy aspirants have attained this maqam, wherein they are so indifferent to physical needs that God appoints someone to look after them. Inward fauna. This is the fauna of qualities in Zat, reality. The possessor of Hall, experience, and the revelation of the attributes of God is immersed sometimes in the fauna of his own qualities, and sometimes in the manifestation of the influence, Asar, and the glory of Tajali, of God. Outward fauna is a portion of the lords of the heart and of the companions of Hall. Inward fauna is peculiar to the noble ones who have outgrown the sway of Hall and have experienced the veil of the heart. And from the society of the men of the heart, they have joined the society of the converter of hearts, God. Baka, that is in relation to outward fauna, is this. After fauna of desire and of will, God makes the slave into a master of desire and will, and gives him absolute control of the reins of guidance. Baka in relation to inward fauna is this. The soul becomes neither God as the veil of creation, nor creation, the veil of God. In fauna, God is the veil of creation. And to those who have not reached the state of fauna, creation is the veil of God.
Thanks, Ernie. We'll go to here today. We'll start next time, page 242.
Wonderful.